Brand advertising is like a type of strategy or basically for a company to sell its brand and products and services to either both current and new clientele and have them like be engaged as well as potentially be like a long-term like avid fan of their products.
Hi, I'm Amanda Vandiver, and welcome to How I Grew This, where we dive into the dynamic world of digital marketing and invite leaders in the space to explore how they overcome industry challenges to achieve growth. Expect insightful conversations that uncover the secrets of our guests' success in the ever-evolving landscape of digital marketing. Hello, and welcome to How I Grew This, where we dive into the dynamic world of digital marketing with leaders in the space to explore how they overcome industry challenges or help others overcome those industry challenges to achieve growth. I'm Amanda Vandiver, and I'm joined by my co-host Adam today and our wonderful guest Shobeir. And I understand y'all go way back, so I would love to hear a little bit about that and a little bit more about you, Shobeir.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Adam, for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Glad to have you, Shobes.
Can I start calling you Shobes? Are we on that level?
Let's do it.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself for our guests.
Great. Yeah, so I'm Shobeir Shobeiri. I'm Senior Director of Business Development here at Mintegral. We are a top 10 mobile SDK ad network. Basically, we compete in most game and non-game applications on mobile as a bidder in their ad stack. And we have ads from full screen ads like reward interstitial to banner native. And we have a global reach of well over 1.2 billion daily active users.
Jeez.
So happy to be on here. And as you mentioned, yeah, I'm kind of a veteran in this space. Been able to work since my days at the App Store launches, testing some apps to joining Moptix when I used to work with Adam to now at Mintegral.
15 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
15 years.
Yeah, we could definitely talk about the evolvement of mobile advertising for sure.
Good old, because we were there, yeah.
Yeah.
Living it. Awesome. Well, it's so great to have you here today. And I'm really excited about this topic. Today, we're going to be talking about the past, present, and future of brand advertising on mobile games. And really to kick us off, I was hoping you two could help explain what brand advertising means in the context of mobile so that we're all on the same page and speaking the same language.
Sure. I mean, brand advertising is like a type of strategy or basically for a company to sell its brand and products and services to either both current and new clientele and have them like be engaged as well as potentially be like a long-term like avid fan of their products. That's kind of like in short, kind of mentioned that of what like brand marketing is in a traditional sense.
Yeah. There's really to bifurcate it into two sections. There's performance and brand advertising, two types. Brand advertising to me is an exercise in trust, building trust with the consumer, building trust with you, the brand, with your consumer, potential consumer. I was reading this morning, there's a marketing rule of 7, and that is that a consumer needs to see your brand advertised 7 times before they start to feel a connection with your brand to start buying. Whereas performance advertising is a exercise in measured outcomes. You put $1 in, you measure the efficacy of that dollar in driving X amount out, hopefully more than what you put in. And so to bifurcate the types of advertising into two sections, brand is an exercise in trust, building a halo effect around people understanding who you are, where performance is driving an outcome.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, the trust is one thing you definitely want to identify as a product. It's kind of the brands want to do. And their, credibility is part of the trust and, just awareness, continuous top of mind. So that's kind of, I think, a couple of the 3 things that brand advertising does on a continuous basis. As you see in like traditional media, like radio, television, and now, like we see on new platforms, like we're part of mobile.
Yeah. One of the things that I see when I think about how advertising hits the average consumer, like if I was explaining this to my mother, I would say, if you see an advertisement for Coca-Cola, they're not expecting you to buy a Coke when you see that ad. But when you see an advertisement that says, book this now or buy this now, that's more of a performance type advertising. You're trying to evoke an action that they can then measure. And those would be the two differences.
Yeah, that's what's standing out to me is this is a little bit more like intrinsic to measure. It's not an actual action that you can point to and say this drove this specific thing. So I'm wondering if that plays any of the role of why it's taken so long for it to become a prominent practice in mobile space, or maybe what else has been a factor.
I was thinking about this morning. So Shobeir and I used to have this conversation 15 years ago. It's like, next year, next year the brands, Coca-Cola is going to come and drop a bunch of money into mobile games back in 2010. And what we kept running into back in the day, I don't know if you remember those Shubs, is we weren't at scale. So the brands would start with a test buy at $50,000, just like, okay, we'll give it a test. Here's $50,000. But back when mobile games were brand new, that was way too much to test. So it didn't have a scale, and they didn't have the mechanism to write one $50,000 check and buy in a bunch of different places. You have to cut a bunch of smaller checks to a bunch of smaller different games. And that was the first difficulty that we faced, was there just wasn't enough scale for these brands who were writing, 7-figure deals on a monthly basis. They couldn't take their time to go worry about, Fruit Ninja, who had 50,000 active daily users.
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of picture it as like, that was the early days of like smartphones back in 2010. It was probably like a few years in. The App Store just launched like a year in. And so, yeah, I mean, you only have like maybe a couple million users, let's say around the world, up to 10 million max possibly. And then that reach, along with the fact that there's probably just several thousand developers,
right? A
lot of which has like evolved from like console game to mobile. And they brought those like quality products, like you just mentioned, Fruit Ninja, to like Rovio.
Right.
And Angry Birds. They were the initial like high quality IP that were on mobile. Now, I mean, if you talk about 15 plus years later, these devices are in the billions. Mobile gaming now is worth like $90 billion as a market cap. Mobile advertising in games are well over 100 billion. So, that is a massive shift.
Yeah.
And then I think there's about a couple 100 million active users. I think about 150 million active mobile game users reach, which is pretty much third, which is like after, say, Facebook and like YouTube. So I kind of picture it the way a position is like mobile games are almost like its own social network. The active user base on it is, and that's the perception. And 70% from what we see of like ads are still in game to game and very performance driven. It's starting to have at least 30% though, like there's a big change from like what we see. And if you go on like platforms like Sensor Tower and others that show data, you'll see on the ad platforms that are specifically on mobile, specifically, SDK-based ads platforms, they are a lot more branded performance ads as well. So I think there's also branded ads and performance-based branded ads that are kind of reaching games. So I think the involvement is definitely there. But, going back to like why back then, it just in 2010, everything was pretty much like a copy paste of what it was on the web, brought to mobile, trying to use some of those best practices, devices and connectivity, like it was still not even 3G. You're talking about LTE. You're talking about like really slow connections. Now we have 5G. Now we have Wi-Fi that's just really fast. These devices are pretty much gaming devices. You can have a full experience like Call of Duty, like you would almost on a console game on your phone. So it's definitely changed a lot as far as like where it's been.
You mentioned something in your introduction that was kind of mind-blowing. 1.2 billion daily active users you can scale, which is 20% of the world's population you reach on a daily basis, which is insane. So in the very beginning, you had a couple 100 million, maybe 100 million. It wasn't worth at scale. And now it's reaching 20% of the world's population. So it's absolutely increased in scale. But one of the things that I've appreciated recently is advertising is very old fashioned. Like it moves very slowly. And the way that the brands buy is they buy through agencies. They give the agency a record AOR. They give those agencies the budget, but the agencies go off and spend money. And they're very old fashioned in how they approach the market because they have a very set process of workflow. And very rarely are they deviating and going and making news with kind of how they're innovating. You look at KFC, who had the person on Twitter that was really, really funny.
Yeah.
And that person made like front page news in a lot of our industry rags about how they were just very innovative and how they were approaching the market. So I think that brands being old fashioned also slowed it down, and the explosion of mobile games really slowed down, caught them behind because they were trying to catch up. And then something I was thinking about this morning as well was the cost. So at first the cost was very low and it was a deal because there was so much inventory and there was a lot of demand. But because performance advertising really is what makes up the bulk of advertising, or traditionally has made up the bulk of advertising, I was looking up some CPM rates, some rates that it costs to advertise today. A brand advertiser, if they go to a well-known magazine, it can be $8 to $20 for a CPM.
Sure.
Which is pretty good deal for a print magazine, especially when you consider the cost of distribution and production. But the cost on a well-known website is $2 to $10. if you view that towards a mobile app or mobile game, mobile games can be anywhere between $4 and $50 for a CPM. I've seen CPMs of over $100 in the thousands of dollars.
Correct.
So the brand now is outcompeted for that inventory. So they can't actually even afford it to turn it around because the mobile performance, like those mobile games can get thousands of dollars per user. So they can spend thousands of dollars for the CPM to capture those users.
Yeah.
So they went from too small to all of a sudden too expensive.
I mean, that's definitely an interesting, just kind of going back to the data sets. The 1.2 billion is just with Mintegral on a daily basis. You can imagine like if you take the dozen networks and just amplify all of our networks combined, take away like obviously some of those that are like very similar user base, that's still like a massive reach for everybody to consider. And the 150 million is more of a general kind of gaming day-to-day that Statistica has. Going to your information, yeah, man, where do we start? I think there was a lot of learnings too, also kind of for like Madison Avenue in New York and the brands to understand like what mobile is. And for them, their best practices, we're just going to focus on what they do best, which is like traditional media and to a certain extent web. So mobile now, as you're saying, yeah, because it's been so game to game focused, I think something like 35 to 45% of like mobile users are gamers now. And this is like casual games and so forth. So like the general public uses like a word game, uses like a puzzle game, maybe uses a board game on mobile. So that's something like one knowledge base that probably could be shared. The other is the price points. You're definitely right. CPMs right now are, pretty pricey. They've come down since the market, in the last couple of years. I think the peak was like around the pandemic, and then it grew from like 2022 was like the ultimate peak. And then since then, it's kind of been around the same. And I've never seen $1,000 CPM as far as like a campaign. But if you kind of take it as, all right, this is the general use of like a game. What's the target audience we're looking for? Is it in parallel to what we have right now on other products and platforms? Can we test something out? You could almost test something as little as like $15,000 to 30
for a budget.
And I mean, if you really want, you can just a couple $100 a day and really see if your product can perform. Yeah. Within other products to compete in a game. So it's not like you're just going to be daunted, like, oh my God, how am I going to get into this application? It's understanding how the products work. Right now, if you want to kind of do a one-to-one to what the web has, yeah, you could just do a typical banner ad. It's very static. It's there. You could have just a huge reach. You get brand recognition. So a lot of e-commerce products do that. Like Amazon, very known to just have like a banner ad in a lot of games right now. That does really well. If you want more of like a engaging experience, a lot of like the delivery apps like Ubers, DoorDashes and others, which cater to say gamers, for example, who are, want to eat like a pizza last minute.
Don't want to move. Don't want to get out of the chair.
Yeah.
But Shobes, I'd say that when you're looking at DoorDash and you look at Uber Eats and you look at Amazon, I'd argue those are performance advertisers. Those aren't brand advertisers.
You could state both. Right? Because they both have like branded experiences. And you could also say, hey, are you current? If you've never used those products, then yeah, they're trying to find new users. And where can they find those new users? And they'll try to find that through performance-based apps, right? Like that's one's like.
So they have to establish trust and then they can drive performance. But I mean, famously, Amazon and Uber.
Yeah. And then the other would be like re-engagement, retargeting, basically, which is like one of the things we were talking about, like how our brands getting into non-games is a lot of, gamers probably have installed these applications or products. And it's a good way to re-engage those users to come back to either their website and or to their applications to be involved. So that's probably more what you're seeing as a branded experience on a performance level in mobile from these products.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because retargeting obviously plays a crucial role in both brand and performance ad strategies. But can you explain for our listeners how retargeting works today, especially now that we know we've shifted away from individual user tracking and this post-deterministic measurement landscape that we live in now?
Yeah, I mean, so the idea is like, how do I get to reach my audience? And within like the lens, you could do it, with the general applications that are out there and social media platforms where the eyeballs are at, or you could basically target games. And as I mentioned before, I think it's actually more probably expensive to acquire new users. And for a traditional brand, we just mentioned a few of them or even more. Yeah, like you're looking at a way to just kind of re-engage users. And again, there's about 35 to 45% of users using games on a daily basis. On average, almost some of these people could reach anywhere between 5 to 20 minutes a day. And that's kind of in total session time. And then from there, you're just trying to retarget your user base. How do you retarget? You show kind of specific ads. It could be something with like special, like you're giving, I think just kind of keeping it with this discussion of Amazon. They're having their big Amazon, I think Prime Day or something that's coming for July in the 16th, 17th. And that's a great way to...
Yeah, seeing a lot of ads about that actually every time I open it.
By the way, I'm not sponsored by Amazon. I'm just telling you this example for everybody to understand is you could target games and gamers. Like, hey, did you know you could get discounts on these products? And don't forget that. And you kind of just engage them to click back to Amazon.com or Amazon, the application, and order. It doesn't feel as intrusive as like another ad does. The other thing too with re-engagement ads is if you understand like what the ad units are in a game and the genre, again, I was talking about non-intrusive, you could actually do really well in games. So what does that mean? If you look at the genres within games and how many sessions and how many ad units are hyper casual, I call it kind of the like fun, easy to play 5 second to a minute long, like really casual games are like roll this ball down the hill, right? And within that 1 minute you play, there's usually 7 ads in that one game alone. But if you play more of like a core or more like a casual game that's either a puzzle and or word game, let's say Words with Friends, for example, Wordle and others, you're looking at maybe 1 to 2 ads in your time frame there. And then like what else is there? There's like core games, usually maybe like 1. It's usually like a rewarded game that's like, hey, you lost the battle, watch this video and kind of get rewarded. So if you understand those kind of mechanics and the demographics of users, then your targeting and your retargeting can be done very well and have a good result for actually much more cost-effective rate than say like we were just talking about performance. The performance of retargeting can be done like at massive scale and probably for a discount and have the reach you're looking for.
So my understanding of how retargeting is done with deprecation of identifiers, and I've asked a lot of DSPs, retargeting DSPs about this, is that number one, there's a surprisingly large amount of opt-ins. So they can use opt-ins to track and target users. So that's one.
That's correct.
The second is there's now with the new version of AdKit, Apple's privacy-centric measurement, there's a retargeting Boolean that basically says this user has downloaded in the last 35 days. So that will tell you not how to target, but how to engage or re-engage a user. And the third, and probably the most promised for effectiveness in the future on measurement, is data clean rooms that allow you to see the overlap ex post facto. So once they've actually served, you can actually see them. But there is a problem about targeting and serving ads to users in games or mobile in general, or post cookies on the web. When you can't track a user and you aren't opt-in, how do you actually find that user?
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm curious on is like, will that kill or severely limit the effectiveness of retargeting in the future?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's a really good point. Obviously, if someone opts in, you have a higher likelihood of targeting the user you're looking for, right? Versus you could generalize, as I mentioned, if you understand the applications, the demographics that use those type of applications, if you're targeting a certain country or region, or even if you really want more granularly, like cities and states.
More than that, that's just targeting. Retargeting is you serve a user again a follow-up ad.
Correct.
So you could target and canvas a region like California or Palo Alto zip code and target them over and over and over. Is that retargeting, or is that just advertising canvassing to a certain DMA?
That is definitely advertising. And I think for retargeting, obviously, like it's probably like better for you to target like re-engaging users who have opted in. But I think if you're, you want to retarget like a general mass user base, like as a genre or demographic, say like certain age range and stuff, you could from different networks.
I have a theory, and this is kind of a cheap theory because it's already kind of published. It's Google's, what they used to call Fledge, but now it's Google Privacy Sandbox. They have engagement API, I think it's called, which is you could actually retarget using first-party data on the device. So basically, the app says, if this user comes back or comes up, I want to pay X amount and serve them this ad. And then on device, that will serve that ad or allow you to serve that ad without ever allowing you to track or see that user. I think that that's going to be the future of retargeting, which is attribution methodologies that are controlled by the platforms will end up allowing you to retarget, but they will control when and where that ad shows up.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that definitely as kind of a thing where most of the networks have their own kind of methodology and so forth. And I'm assuming you guys also see something like that from like an MMP level tracking capability.
Yeah.
Where you guys have a little bit different than say your peers and competitors do. Is that correct?
Yeah, we see a lot of the new methodologies for how people are tracking. Now, I heard a theory the other day that Google Privacy Sandbox may never actually roll out because the DMA and other EU certifications are trying to block it. And Google will just say, fine, cookies deprecated, figure it out.
Yeah.
Which will be interesting. Another person told me that he doesn't see cookie deprecation happening before the end of the decade.
Wow.
So I think we've got a long way to go.
I want to talk a little bit more about the future of mobile advertising here. Are there any other emerging trends or technologies that you think will really start shaping the industry in the coming years?
I mean, I kind of discussed like something about like the evolvement of the ad units and products. If you kind of look at what we've seen in just the last 15 years, there's only been like a couple ad units, in my opinion, that's very mobile centric. And it's become a thing that's been used, which is, and specifically like performance based, which is rewarded video where a user opts in and gets a reward to watch the ad. Say usually it takes about 30 seconds to a minute long. The other is a playable, which is almost like a game within a game, but it's an ad unit creative that you could play that application as an ad, test it out before you go and download it. From my perspective, I think these devices actually have so much capability, and we've tested a few things out. And I think in the next few years, you're going to start seeing.
I agree.
I actually believe this. People have been like challenging me, but I think like AR is a great product that's going to come out at some point. You're going to see like real life product placements that feel like very nice.
Okay.
And it doesn't feel like you're like being forced, and it doesn't crash your phone. So like if you're walking around somewhere and you want to see like a product placement that's very relative to, what you're doing. Let's say you're traveling, you're like, what is this? And it shows something and you're like, okay, would you like maybe a little bit more comfortable shoes to wear here? I don't know, something of that nature. Yeah, that could be something. And I think Snap and a few other platforms tried this recently. That's just one vertical, like an example of like an ad unit I feel like could come out.
Well, I'd say that Roblox is doing this today. Roblox, in a lot of ways, virtual reality, where you have an avatar walking around and brands are actually creating brand experiences or like brand lands within the Roblox ecosystem. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of the precursor to what will happen with VR and AR starting to expand.
Yeah. And I think the metaverse is interesting. You could kind of almost like build out a whole community with like a brand and product as well. And the Roblox is definitely that like poster child product on mobile with a huge daily active user base that's growing, and they're becoming adults. So their spend is going to get higher and higher. The other, which is like traditional that we've seen, which is maybe something that could be just much more easier to do and maybe more lighter. I call it this, like takeovers or skinning of an application, where in the past, it was like super expensive to buy out or like an application. Now you could almost like merge together with a company and a brand. What does that mean? So in the last couple of years, Scopely, for example, worked with Hasbro, created Monopoly Go. They built this really great experience of like a traditional board game into like a casual experience. They had the social best practices from their other games that they've been doing for the last 15 years. And the game is done pretty exceptionally. I mean, what released in the first year alone, it's generated over $2 billion. Yeah, so something like that is kind of like, I think the bigger picture of like a fully embedded experience of a game and brand. But there's been stuff like in the last 10 years, if you want to kind of say more like simpler, Gucci did a partnership with like Wildlife for tennis clash. I think it was during around this time, around Wimbledon a few years back during pandemic. They tested this out and it was a great kind of plugin. So you're playing tennis in your game. You want your favorite characters to have Gucci. You could buy it, test it. Oh, I actually kind of like this. I'm going to go buy the real product. So that experience is something that could actually happen too, in my opinion, from like an embedded experience from, the other would be like if you're a celebrity or a famous person, there have been good apps and there have been failures. But like a good example was Kim Kardashian, I think her app with Blue Games, and that lasted like 10 plus years and it generated well over, I think over 100 million possibly revenue.
Which is crazy.
I'll have to double check, but that was another kind of like a personal branded experience. So I wonder if like you'll see influencers more and more getting into, ads and products and co-ad exist with a brand and sell it on like mobile. And that way you're almost like, as you see kind of in the stories, Instagram stories or Snap stories or TikTok stories, you'll see it within a game.
Interesting. I love hearing about these creative approaches to advertising that you've both seen. Maybe to wrap things up, can y'all share a little bit more about that? Maybe for our listeners, if they're interested in making sure that they're running ads that avoid that fatigue and that they are contributing positively to user retention. Anything to share there?
Yeah, I mean, what we usually advise, like if you're doing advertising within like our network, is to have creatives continuously fresh and updated. So what does that mean? Like when you launch a game, let's say, and do advertising on a network like ours, we suggest anywhere from like 3 to 5 minimal creatives to perform well. And then over the period of time of like several weeks to a month, like we would suggest to replace a few that didn't perform well with the others. And so I think that is kind of a way to just keep continuous flow, quality assurance. The other is like specifically almost going back to retargeting. If you have things that are like in real life, if it's game to game, even you want to offer like discounts, you want to offer, hey, you're playing a racing game right now and it's a Formula One, you want to add tires. Do you want Michelin's at a discount? Or in real life, like, hey, you have a nice car, you have a Tesla, you want Michelin's and they're on discount, come to this application. So I think you can see stuff like that appear more and more in the short term as far as like keeping it fresh.
So my take is I'm an ad guy. So all of my advice comes back to advertising performance, measure performance, figure out a way. So for brand advertising, you can do holdouts, incremental studies, figure out exactly how your advertising is doing. So if I were to say avoid fatigue, ensure your ads are performing, you have to be able to measure performance. And I see time and time again, brands that everyone would recognize not understanding how to measure performance. I think that's a travesty because it's just throwing money away.
You can't improve what you can't measure.
Exactly right.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Shobes, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate all the insight. And thanks to our listeners as well. Hope that this was insightful.
Thank you for having me, Amanda and Adam. And I'm excited to see the future of ads too with brands and games.
Awesome. Likewise. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please leave a review wherever you listen to this and share with someone trying to grow their career. Until next time, keep growing.